favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Next, claims. What do you have of particular interest to discuss with us, Nick?
We're getting close to the end of the year, and don't forget to turn on your mics. Guys, push the talk button there. Forgot to remind you. Most of the stuff is pretty standard. The DBT transportation services for $18,478. That is our annual contract for the instrument landing system maintenance. BIT computers, that was the final payout for the airport's portion of the city server project. So that is all up and running, and we're finished with that. American Electric Power, the $6,491.90. That is for maintenance for the lights on the power poles out off the east end that we're hoping to get rid of here before too long.
Is that for a whole year?
No, that's just anytime that there is maintenance required on those, we call them and let them know a light is out or whatever the case is. They will do the work, and then they send us a bill for that maintenance that they have to perform.
Okay.
And is that the same lighting we're talking about in the engineer's report coming up
It
shortly?
is.
Okay. So we'll talk about that in more detail
Yep.
shortly. Got you.
Other than that, pretty standard unless you have specific questions.
I move we accept the claims, especially the $35,603.13 for Accent Aviation Group and the $375 for Engard.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the claims as laid out in John's motion. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Okay, well, we'll go right into the engineer's report then. Now, Ken is not here this evening. He's filed a written report. You want to talk about it for a minute?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot new, just an update on the design phase for runway 1836. That total project amount was $160,000. There is still $28,000 of FAA grant funds available in there for once that is finally complete. And the other thing that we were both going to talk about was the power line relocation. As everyone is already aware, we did receive supplemental funding for those power lines. That is a 100% grant for that project. We have been awarded $6.3 million. There is a little bit of wiggle room on that depending on what the final project cost comes out to. Those funds are generated through user fees and aircraft fuel tax, federal aircraft fuel tax. So that money, that $6.3 million, none of that is the airport's money or local money. That's all coming from the FAA. After the day before we found out about that supplemental funding, Ken and I, James Emmons, the city engineer, sat down with AEP. That the reason that cost has gone up on the maintenance is some of the infrastructure is failing on those lights. The actual underground electric feeds that go to those power poles and power the lights is starting to fail. They were put in the early 80s, and it's just they've reached their life. And so they were concerned that if certain parts failed, parts of that lighting system could go out of service completely. And so we met to try and come up with a good plan of attack on these lights. As the original estimate they were thinking could be 120 to 150,000. After sitting down and discussing with them what our goals were with the power lines for the next couple of years, we were able to bring that down to roughly 70 to 72,000 for those lights, using some solar panels and things like that. Now that we have received supplemental funding, we have submitted a rush order on some air spacing for the proposed lowered power lines to see when those power lines come down, which towers will need lights, if any lights are required, and then can we reuse the lights if we have to go up and replace them now. Say we put in a solar panel light, can we reuse that on the new, or is it better to put the infrastructure in now so that when the new towers go in, we're trying to make sure that we're not spending money twice.
Yeah.
Since we received the supplemental funding, we have made AEP aware of that. AEP knows that we were in the middle of a airport consultant selection, and so they agreed to push back a meeting a couple weeks until that selection has been made. And then we'll sit back down with them and really hit the books and figure out what is going to absolutely be required and what we can do now to prevent those lights from going out, make sure that they are maintained. And then how can we reuse those lights on the new facilities if they are needed? So that's where those power line relocation and that light bill, it is a little bit higher this time because we have had a couple failures that they've had to come out and fix, so. Any other, that was all I
Anything else
have, unless you guys have specific questions.
About Ken's report, anything else?
No, I didn't have anything.
Okay. Well, between Ken's report and the manager's report, it's probably a good time to review the status of where we are in the consultant selection process. I'm gonna let you start with that, Nick, so.
Well, as you guys know, we sent out requests for qualifications from airport or engineering firms here in the state of Indiana. We had Hanson Professional Services submit, Butler, Fairman, and Seifert, and CHA as well submitted. After reading through their statements of qualifications, we did interview all three of the firms. And after the interview, the selection committee again met this morning, and we have put together a recommendation for the board. Jay, would you like to make that announcement, or would you like me to?
Sure, no, I can. After reviewing all three groups that came in and talked to us, the committee is recommending that the board go with CHA Consulting. I want to tell you a couple things about that whole process and make it clear. First of all, as you may recall, when we started this process a few months ago, it was motivated by the fact that we felt it was appropriate to do due diligence, which is to renew these contracts every few years. And this review process at no point should be taken by anybody as dissatisfaction with anybody's particular behavior. It's just, it was time to review it. And so I think that's the first and most important thing. Second thing is that all of the groups that we talked to are very well qualified entities. I did not have any feeling, and I don't think anybody else on the committee did, that there was anybody that would be a total letdown, that would be a failure, that would be a disaster for the board to pursue. But I also note that after review, independent reactions, everybody that was on the committee had the same reaction, that CHA had put itself just a little bit above its competitors in its review, in its presentation, excuse me. And so we've given you the scores here, but beyond the scores, I think subjectively, everybody also felt that it was just a little bit ahead, and I think everybody is very confident and looking forward to working with CHA and making this transition.
It was really hard choice because all three firms were well qualified, and the written paperwork, it just, there was no clear choice to us, and that's why we decided to interview all three firms to try to get a better feel beyond the written submissions. And even then, it was close. But like Jay said, CHAs seem to, in the interviews, elevate themselves slightly above the others.
Mayor, any comments you have beyond what we've talked about already?
No, I just feel that the process was very good. Nick bringing, through his request for qualifications, bringing three really qualified candidates to the table. I don't think we could have really gone wrong with anybody, but I truly believe the recommendation we made. Again, you've got the score sheets. Every one of the 5 members had CHA listed on top, and I think that said a lot for their presentation. I know Nick's going to have Mary stand up and say a few words here in a second from CHA, but I did very much thank them for their process and the ability to really articulate well during their interview with us how excited they were and how interested and how knowledgeable they were of our airport, but this mammoth process that we have ahead of us. The money's great, and that allows us to get started, but there's a lot of work. And again, I think the process helped us realize that our selection was critical, and I feel very gratified, and thank you all for your time, because I know it took some time. The process took quite a bit of time, but the decision that was made, I feel very confident making that recommendation to the board for your consideration.
Yes.
So,
And I know you thank CHA, and they're right here for the quality of their presentation, but to the extent that anybody from the other organizations is here, or as we know, watching us on the internet, or talks to anybody later, a great personal thanks from everybody in the committee to them as well, because again, they all did really good jobs with their presentations, giving us a sense of who they are, and they're all quality people. We're not qualifying anybody because they're not a quality organization.
no.
And for the sake of the timing of this is we make a tentative recommendation for a consultant. The FAA requires us to do this purely on merits and quality, and then we talk finances with them in a little bit. And so what we would need, I think, is a tentative a motion to engage in negotiations with them and tentatively work with them to work out our contract and our arrangements. And it's something you've probably not seen me do, anybody on this board, since I've been president. I will make that motion to select and engage CHA Consulting as our consultant.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further questions? Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Now, Nick, if you would like to introduce Mary for the board.
Well, Mary Kirstein is here to represent CHA. She would be our program manager and project manager point contact with CHA moving forward here. So, Mary, if you would like to step up and just introduce yourself and.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if this is on. I
It
can
is.
speak loud enough,
Yep.
so. I'm Mary Kirstein. I'm originally from Southern Indiana and now live in Brownsburg and work in downtown Indianapolis with CHA. So everyone that was part of our interview team is in our Indianapolis office. So we have Nathan Leanhart. He'll be the design lead, and he's been with our company about 18 years now. Robert Lafayette, he'll be our environmental lead, and he has about 10 years of experience here with CHA as well. And then we also have Andy Hahn, who the mayor knows, and he'll be our client liaison. He does a lot of work within the state of Indiana and has a lot of contacts that will be great for us to have. So, and then we also we have Travis Carnes, who is part of our energy group, and he'll be doing all of the work with AEP. He'll be a coordinator with them, and he's worked with AEP in the past and has experience in Fort Wayne. So we think he'll be a great asset to our team. Any questions? I'd be glad to take any. I know not everyone was in the selection, so.
But Mary, just to make it clear for the board's sake, if anybody on the board needs to yell at anybody, you're the person to talk to, right?
Yes.
Okay. We'll just get that out of the way so everybody knows, so feel free to yell at her. I don't anticipate that'll be necessary at all, but.
And the only other thing I have is tomorrow, Nathan and I will be coming up to meet with Nick. We plan on being here around 10. So if anyone would like to attend, we're just kind of trying to do an introductory transition meeting, and we're anticipating it to be a good chunk of the day. But if you're free and you want to come out to the airport and meet Nathan or be part of that meeting, feel free. So.
Just make sure you coordinate that with me so we don't have all of you there at the same time.
Yeah, no, gotcha.
That'll be good. We could expect drawings Friday evening then.
Yeah. Be moving the lines on Monday, so, okay, thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you,
We
Mary.
look forward to
Thank you.
working with you very much.
We look forward to working with you all as well.
Jay, I just want to say one other thing. I know Ken Ross and NGC provided a very valuable service to this board and our community, and certainly want to thank them for all the work that they did as our past consultant.
Yes, I agree. We've always had a good relationship with Ken, and he's making some transition choices in his life, which is fine. But we're very glad to have him. We had a good discussion with him as he was part of the presentation of one of the teams that talked with us. So,
Great.
yep, thank you, Ken. Okay, rest of the manager's report, Nick. Fire away.
I'm pulling it up here, give me 1 second. I mean, it's a pretty standard end-of-year manager's report. If you guys have specific questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any of that. Obviously, as I said in the last meeting, when it comes to November through the beginning of January, there's not too much as far as executive travel or jet travel is concerned. A lot of people are with families over the holidays, so unless you guys have specific questions.
Well, even with that, it wasn't a bad month for summer.
And I know
Bad
I've,
month for Image Air.
and I know I've said it in the past, I just would like to say it again, because of the fuel pricing structure change that we did make, even though our fuel sales are much lower than where they were last year, our revenue has maintained fairly flat across the board with that, so we're excited that those changes are working.
Yep. Okay, and as George White used to say back in the day, in terms of income statement, we're getting the money to the city where it needs to be, and we don't have a clerk treasurer mad at us for any
Nope.
shortfall of any kind, do we? Okay.
No, she's pretty happy because we just
Okay,
saved
that's
almost
right.
$450,000 with that supplemental fund, so.
Yeah. Remember that, Gene? Every month, George would ask, so we keeping Elaine happy?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Back in the day. Any questions for Nick about his report? Okay, on to unfinished business.
I will try and move through this quickly. As you guys remember, Dan and John and I have been working diligently for almost a year to come up with a new land lease for the airport. With other projects and other things, it kind of got put on the back burner every now and then, but we have this to present to you. In your board pack, the current land lease, as you guys can see, is a grand total of about 3 pages. I guess, let me see here. Yep, 3 pages. And it just didn't quite cover all of the bases that the FAA was looking for. When we went through our land use audit back in 2017, they found a few discrepancies in our current land lease that we had been using, and they just wanted us to update it. So using the FAA-provided ACRP guideline handbook, I wrote the two lease agreements that you guys are looking at. The main difference between the two leases, so there is 2 documents. One is titled Airport Tenant Land Lease Final, and the other one is Airport Tenant Land Lease Alternate. And Dan and John agreed on the alternate, but I'm still getting pushback from the FAA, and I'm not sure that I 100% agree with a couple of the changes, and so we talked about it and thought we should just have a full board discussion on the big change, or the big pivot point, which is Article 2, Section 2, subsection 6. So that is, it's talking about the early termination by the lessor or an expiration of the lease. The difference between these 2 leases is strictly 1 line. And in the recommendation by the FAA in their ACRP guideline, if a tenant's lease is terminated by cause because they've been found at fault, and those are listed at the bottom of the proposed lease under default and remedies, they give the airport the power to terminate that lease, and in their math, there is an intangible benefit of owning a hangar, which they equate to 2.5% of the value of that building per year that they are operating out of that hangar. So for example, if we have a tenant who after 10 years breaks local, state, federal laws, anything like that, to the point where the board would decide to terminate their lease, the FAA's guidance is to terminate that lease, and then we would go out for appraisal for the building using an MAI appraiser. And then because they were a tenant for 10 years, we would deduct 2.5% of the value of that appraised value each year for the 10 years. So if they were a tenant for 10 years, the building appraised for $100,000, then they would, it's the stick that the FAA gives the airport to help keep its tenants in line, that we would only pay them a 75% of the value of that building. Dan and John I understand where they're coming from, and as a, fingers crossed, future hangar owner at the airport, I would agree with what they're saying. From that standpoint, they would like to add a sentence that would give that lessor a 90-day window to sell their hangar. So, or the lessee, excuse me. So if the board would decide to terminate a lease, that lessee would have 90 days from that termination notice to sell their hangar and bring a new potential buyer to the board at X price. And then at that time, the board could utilize their right of first refusal to purchase the hangar at the agreed price, or that sale would be allowed to go through then.
So instead of us buying them out, you want to have an option for private market to buy them.
Right, the whole idea is to give them an option, a 90-day option, to be able to sell it at fair market value instead of taking the reduction.
Okay. Before we get back to that, and Nick, I'm looking at another thing here. I'm looking at the end. It says, after 30 years, in the basic final draft, it says,
Yeah.
after 30 years not previously terminated, you will pay 25% of fair market value.
Unless a new lease
Yeah.
has been,
Sure, but I'm saying is in the alternate, it looks like it says 75%.
correct. Sorry, I forgot that changed too.
Okay,
That's because that's what John and I thought it ought to be.
Yeah.
okay.
And we don't have to make a motion on this tonight. It was just something that I wanted to bring up, have a discussion. If there were questions, comments, anything like that, I would like to get them out now and then maybe take some time to think about it, but.
Yeah. Is there, I assume the two of you are ready to proceed, because you've already gotten your idea that this is a
Yeah.
good alternative.
Is the FAA questioning that?
I have not submitted the
That-
final two drafts to them yet. I wanted to get your
Oh, okay.
eyes on it first, and then before we start using this, the ADO has asked that we send them a copy just to make sure it ticks off what they are looking for after our land use audit.
Do we need to wait for them to look at it before we would approve it? Or can we approve it and then have them look at it?
We can approve it with the caveat that they have to be okay
Mhm.
with it. If there are changes made, then we can either make those changes at that time or revisit it in the future. Or we can table it and I can send it to them and we can get their comments and move from there.
I think we follow through on it. I'm in agreement with John and Dan on this.
Yeah, I'm not, I mean, strongly either way, and two of you put the time and effort into this together, and you both are real smart folks, and
So
so
which version are we?
the
are we
alternate version.
alternate.
Yeah. your-
Because
your
mine
alternate
doesn't
presented.
say final or alternate that I can
Oh,
find.
you have you have the paper copy in
Yeah.
board packet.
Oh.
It's got that.
It's in
So
there.
I wasn't sure which one we're talking about.
It's the language you've suggested as opposed to what the standard was that FAA has suggested. It would include the 75% instead of 25%, and then
And then give
the
them
other
And then
buyout
a
90
provision.
day
Yeah,
90-day
90-day
option,
option to buy out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 3 months, absolutely.
John and I's thinking on
Yeah.
that was that the clause is titled early termination by lessor, which is the airport authority or board. Okay, so we're forcing them out, okay, for cause.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll grant that, stipulate that. But our thinking was, okay, we're telling you you have to leave, but we're going to give you a window to get yourself whole, or as close to whole as you can. Otherwise, we're invoking this clause.
Right.
Yep.
In which they will be somewhat compensated, but maybe not wholly
Yes.
compensated, yeah.
That, I don't know,
Sure.
that, and then the tail end of that was, as Nick said, the FAA prefers that basically at the end of 30 years, it becomes a virtual donation.
Yeah.
And I understand the thinking on one hand, but John and I again felt fairly strongly that that wasn't entirely fair.
Yeah, right.
And I'll tell you where our thinking's come from, and I know where they're thinking. And Warsaw has historically been a little different than a lot of airports. A good deal of the development that has happened here over the years is because of the private individuals, because the local government and the federal government has not wanted to put the money up. So most of what we have has been private, so we felt like it was not quite right to punish people that have helped to bring us where we're at.
Right.
That's our thinking.
Well, the worst that can happen is we'll still have to submit it to FAA, and they're still gonna tell us whether they're gonna approve it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do also want to say that is, as Dan pointed out, for cause. If we
Yes.
were, if we need a space, a hangar space, for future development that we don't currently foresee, there's a separate clause where we would pay the full
Fair,
market
yeah.
value for that
Right.
building. So this is strictly, terminating a lease for cause.
Okay.
Well, I would entertain a motion to approve it with the alternate that John and Dan have recommended, and get approval from the FAA if anyone wants to make that motion.
I make that motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Okay, and now off to the auto trader portion of the meeting. We're
Yeah.
talking about a courtesy car and a pickup truck.
First, we're gonna talk about the courtesy cars. Well, my computer just went silly here. Give me 1 second to pull this back up, I apologize. So our current courtesy car, standard operating procedure is 3 steps: have a valid license, be 21 years of age, short-term only, in town only, 4, and then be used, during regular airport business hours. There is caveats in there that, if the board pre-approves the usage, that someone could use it for longer than 2 hours or outside of Warsaw or overnight. I am proposing 2 drastic changes to that underneath the courtesy car and the reserved courtesy car proposals. As you read, the main difference is it's just a little bit more in depth. Working with our current insurance provider, it just helps to cover the airport a little bit more. We know who the pilot is, make sure that they do have that valid license and everything. It spells out what the different rules, the protocols for that, for our courtesy car program are. And then it also gives the airport the ability to charge, if a pilot needs to come in and go grab lunch or go grab catering for the aircraft or something like that, they can still do that free of charge. But if someone needs to come in and borrow the car for, 4 hours to 8 hours, or what did I have? Up to 4, if they want to use the car from 2 to 4 hours, we just are going to ask for $15 to help cover our costs of having that courtesy car available. And then if they would like to reserve that car for a 24-hour, up to a 24-hour period, say they pick it up at 5 o'clock at night, go to a hotel, bring it back the next morning, we would charge $35 for that overnight fee, up to 24 hours. So this just gives the airport a little bit of wiggle room on that so that we can get back some of the costs that we are putting into having these crew cars available to our pilots. Obviously, we'd like to continue the courtesy car program as it stands so that we do have that available just for the everyday general aviation pilot. But we're looking to supplement that with a next level service for our corporate pilots. Several times they need rides to and from hotels, and taxi service, while it is available, sometimes it is slow. Otherwise, they have to get a rental car through another rental car agency because we don't have very good ground transportation around the airport. And this would just give us that extra tool.
Do we have more than one car for them now?
We do. We
Okay.
have we'll be talking about this in just a
Yeah.
moment with the replacement. We have a 2001 Ford Taurus station wagon that we have had since 2001.
Yeah,
We have been recommended that we get rid of that car. It's to the point where it is costing more and it is down for maintenance more often than we are using it. And we have actually Mayor Wiggins' old car that he drove. It's a 2007 Buick, 2008 Buick.
we had two of them.
Mm, I
We
saw that
purchased-
one, yeah.
We purchased the Buick, I think it was my first year in 2013. The mayor was going to trade it in for another vehicle, and we figured out what the trade-in cost was, and then we just paid that portion of the mayor's new vehicle, and then we took ownership of the old one.
Yeah.
And it's worked great for us for the last couple years, but that Taurus is on its last legs, which we'll
Okay.
talk about in
So
a
you
second.
anticipate you still want to have two,
We
but
would
you
like to
might be
maintain.
replacing one of them.
Correct, yeah.
And you want approval of these guidelines first?
If that, yes.
Didn't we actually have three at one time?
We've only had two. Before the Buick, we had the old Mercury Sable, and while I was here. And when we first went underneath the city garage for maintenance, they were looking at that car, and it actually had a cracked block. And with it having power-assisted brakes, if the engine quit, you lost brakes. And so they said, you're not getting this car back. And we towed it over to Lewis Salvage because it was beyond the point of repair.
How frequently are these?
Linda and I use them to drive around town for errands, to bring claims down to the city office. And then it totally depends on the use or the traffic. Last Thursday, was it? Thursday, we had 5 aircraft at the airport, and of the 5, all 5 of them wanted to use a courtesy car sometime throughout the day, and so scheduling back and forth, and luckily some pilots wanted breakfast, others wanted lunch, but then they had to go get catering, so there is an absolute need for them.
Well, I'm not worried about your use and Lynn's use when I asked for that, but if you say where they're used at least weekly?
Oh,
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yep.
Almost daily, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when you say reserve, that's when somebody calls ahead and asks for it to be saved for
Correct.
them.
So
Okay.
in the last 2 years, we have received more and more calls asking to reserve a courtesy car, and we've never done it in the past, so this is our first attempt at it. This is gonna have to be a living program, see over the next 6 months how this works. My initial plan is to only reserve one car at a time. So if somebody calls and and reserves the car, if somebody calls 20 minutes later, sorry, we don't have one available, and that's just gonna be subject to availability of the cars.
Right.
That way, we always have a courtesy car available for the drop-in pilot who needs to run to the store, run to a restaurant quick. But having the second car will give us the ability to do both of those programs, and as we do it over the next year, I'll be able to really look at the numbers and then make a better recommendation of how we can possibly, or maybe, we might not need to amend it, we might need to completely overhaul
It's
it.
really important that we have courtesy cars.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as pilots, and I know John, anytime I went somewhere, I took advantage of
Right,
the
exactly. Me too.
opportunity.
Right.
I needed the
Yeah,
opportunity,
sure.
and usually, almost always, it was available, or something was available to me. Otherwise, you get somewhere, and, it's hard to
You-
get.
you
Walk around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One important note I want to bring out on the old guidelines versus the new ones is the old guidelines, it took board action to allow them to have it more than 2 hours. And the new guidelines is the manager's decision.
Yep.
Which I totally agree with. I don't think that should have to come before the board.
I agree.
Because one thing, we only meet once a month,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I'm sure that at the time that was passed in 1998, the volume of people expecting courtesy cars was undoubtedly much lower.
Yeah.
That was why we decided it was probably time for
Yeah,
an
we don't,
update.
I don't, no, you don't wanna call me and find out whether you can use
You
a
don't wanna
car
do a
for
special
trailer.
meeting every time?
No, thank you.
Do you guys wanna come to a special meeting every time? So if you guys are okay with that, we need a motion to approve these as the new standard operating procedures for courtesy cars.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Very
Moved
good.
and seconded, any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay, motion carried.
Which leads me directly into the next conversation. The 2001 Ford Taurus is at the end of its life. It is to the point where it just needs to be replaced. I am proposing that we solicit quotes from Ford dealerships for a 2020 Ford Escape. With airport discounts and government discounts, it is typically cheaper for us to purchase a new vehicle than it is to purchase a 3 to 5 year old vehicle. And specifically with the warranty and the maintenance on a new vehicle, just in the end, it is a much more cost-effective measure. So if you guys are okay with it, what I have submitted in the board pack is a direct printout of the car that we will be submitting for quotes. And then we will, if you guys are okay with that, we will call the different Ford dealers and start getting those numbers in and hopefully be able to present those sealed quotes at the January board meeting.
Okay, we don't need to take any formal action, you're just trying to get,
I just
okay,
need-
this is the kind of thing you want me to look for.
Unless you guys have a drastic change, I just need an okay, go
What
get
size
quotes.
vehicle is the Ford Escape?
It is one size below the Ford Edge. It's a,
I don't know what that is.
okay, it's a small, Ford, well, Linda's yours in the parking lot.
Looks
You
like
can
that.
look at Linda's car when you walk
Yeah.
out. It's a four-door,
You got a picture in here?
small
Yeah.
SUV.
Whoop, there was one.
There was one.
Ooh, wait a minute, I think we hit it. I'll
Here.
get it back.
Well, I'm not,
I didn't do it.
yeah.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
It's a compact SUV. It's got really good fuel mileage, and Ford partners directly with airports, which is why we're sticking with Ford. They give us the best discounts. That's why we also use their trucks. So
Is it a four-door?
it is a four-door.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
got
four-door.
it's got a trunk. If there is luggage that they would need to move, there is enough space for 4 bags in the back.
And if they're my height or higher, you should give them the car Ernie had.
Good enough.
It's actually surprising.
No,
There's-
I've gotten behind the wheel of this car, so that's my suggestion.
Ultimately, I would like to, with this program, we'll be working on this over the next couple of years, and it's part of our equipment maintenance program where we'll be trading these in more frequently to retain the value in these vehicles, because the cost of ownership over the life of the car, it's cheaper for us to trade in every couple of years versus buying and then maintaining and driving it into the ground and then not having any residual value in it. The other vehicle that we'll look at later on will be slightly larger than this. So if a large family, luggage, things like that were to come in, we would have the ability to give them that size of a vehicle if they were to need it.
Yeah, fine, just bring us the pricing. Now, my question here, do we need to, at the end of the year, do we need to reserve any money, or,
This will be on next year's budget.
okay, so we're not.
It's deliberate
We're
that
not
we're
looking
doing
to hold
No.
on to any money.
No, it's deliberate that we're doing it now so we can get it first thing next year.
So do we typically pay cash for these things?
We once this bid process, we will pay the total bid price of the car minus the trade-in, and then whatever that low denominator is going to be the low bid, and then we will pay for that vehicle at that time. We will not finance it.
Okay.
Okay, and what about this pickup truck you got on the list?
If you guys are okay with this,
Go
we'll move
ahead
on to
and
the
find
pickups.
and look at, yeah.
So there are 2 Ford pickups that are listed. One main difference between the two. So we have a 2000, this is going to get a little bit complicated. So I'm going to start with the crew cab F-350, which is the one you're looking at.
Yeah.
And I'm looking to the board for a little bit of guidance on this. Currently, this truck that I'm showing you right now is it's a carbon copy, just 4 years newer than what our newest truck currently is. And we are looking at possibly replacing our oldest plow truck with this. That truck is a 2002 F-250. The reason I say possibly replacing, we are going to go out for bid for the low price of this truck. But if the value of the trade-in is too low, my proposal is going to be that we decide not to trade in the 2002 truck and we maintain it as a backup vehicle for when one of our other trucks breaks down during plow season. It doesn't matter what year it is, every single year when we have a major snow event, 9 out of 10 times a piece of equipment will go down for some reason or another. A perfect example, this past, just a couple weeks ago over Veterans Day, when we got that big snow, the beginning of that snow was very, very heavy and wet, and then it turned very fluffy and powdery. By the end of that day plowing, the truck I was driving was completely frozen. So much snow had blown into the bottom of it, and it wasn't producing any power. We had to park it in the shop, and it had to sit there for almost 5 hours just to thaw out and let that snow melt. And luckily I was the only one out plowing, so I just jumped in one of the other trucks and went out. Had that been a normal day of operation, with all 4 of us out plowing, one of us would be sitting out and not being able to go plow. So ultimately, we do need 4 trucks at the airport to have that backup and redundancy for when a piece of equipment goes out of service. And so what I'm proposing to the board is to replace that, potentially replace that 2002 with this truck and this build. And then if the trade-in value is not high enough, we would just pay cash for the new truck and keep the 2002 for another year or 2 as that backup vehicle to our current fleet.
Okay, and you believe that that's still, if it was a new truck, 'cause, I mean, that's more expensive than the Ford Escape, that we're still gonna get more bang for our buck than we would be if we looked for one that was 3 years into the market?
Yes. And I'll discuss that with our next truck. Thank you for that segue.
Okay.
So the other truck that I am proposing is slightly different than the other one. Currently, I have a take-home truck that I use for after-hour emergencies, for evening and weekend snow plows, because I am on call 24 hours a day. That take-home truck we purchased it in 2016. It is a model year 2017. And right now, because it still has a year left on warranty, it is valued higher than if we wait for that warranty to go out. So what I am proposing, we only paid $35,000 for that truck. Yes, the sticker price on this is, from just on the internet, is $58,425, but that does not reflect what the discount, the Ford government and airport discount would be. So what I am proposing is that we go out, we solicit quotes for a trade-in on our, on that take-home truck for this one. And if we don't get enough in trade-in, we'll keep the truck and use it for another couple years. But from my research, we should be able to, if we don't break even on the vehicle, we're gonna be very, very close, and the board will have to decide, do we wanna pay a couple $1,000s for a new truck, or do we just, if it comes in at, $15,000 for the new truck, then I would say no, we keep the truck that we have. But if we can swap into a new truck at, say, $1,800 or $2,000, $500 a year for 4 years is really, really good for using a piece of equipment like that. And so that's, working on this equipment management structure, that's what I propose we do with
Yeah,
that.
'cause I have a hard time swallowing getting another truck at this price.
And I 100% agree, and it will be 2 separate quotes. They will be 2 separate vehicle quotes. And this one we won't do it unless the trade-in value is where it needs to be for it.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure that that is very, very clear in the language that we
Okay.
send out.
So,
So if we buy a new truck and we do trade it in the old one, then how many trucks does that give us?
That would give us 3.
Okay.
So in the future, if we maintain 3 is really what we need on a day-to-day basis. 4 is preferred, and myself and the 3 line techs, if we're all there, one of us is either in the skid steer or we're in the terminal, because we don't have anything to, we don't have another piece of equipment. And that's where ultimately having that 4th pickup would be a huge help.
well, you're not asking us to spend any money tonight,
Nope.
so we're glad, we want to get this information, and then Nick will provide it to us when he's got it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll review it and make a decision then.
Yeah.
Okay?
Other than that, that's all I have.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, other than that. Anything further from the board?
Nope.
If not, we will plan to have our first board meeting of the new year on the second Tuesday of January, which sounds like it's the 14th of May.
I believe that is correct.
And
Yep.
of course, that's our reorganizational meeting, so we'll be able to confirm that we're keeping the same schedule, and you all can talk about officers, and we'll show up for that meeting and see what happens.
January 14th,
January 14th.
2020.
Gene. Yeah,
Where did they go?
yeah.
I know.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good.
My calendar doesn't even go there.
Where does it,